So, one of the things that I was dealing with
In this lesson,
since
we're going to talk
yesterday
about UTM examples, how you can utilize your
is learning
UTM
about UTM parameters.
skills now for different marketing campaigns. And to give this a little bit structure, I would follow these questions in order to find out more what you actually want to do and prepare them correctly. So first of all, what are the landing pages where you want to send the user on your website once he clicks on the link? Then the next question would be, what are the actual links? Where are they coming from? Are they coming from Facebook? How many of these links do you need and have? And that might correspond to the ad sets that you have. How many different ads do you have? How many links do you actually need to generate? Or is it always the same link? And then, very important, what questions do I want to answer later on in my analytics? Do I just want to know where the user came from, so the specific website, or do I actually want to know what ad he has clicked on or which campaign he has gone through? And am I able to distinguish different campaigns from each other? Again, there's always a level of detail that you can go into, and I just want you to be aware of it beforehand so you can plan it out correctly. And then you might be thinking about, like, how can I actually group my campaigns? Now, this might be different for a PPC campaign where it's very straightforward, where you have a campaign level, ad set level, and so on. Whereas at a social media level, you're maybe just sending posts randomly on different times of day, but you might be able to group them in terms of the context that they deliver. Like, are there a question? Are there a quote from somebody? Or can we group them in the week that we actually send out these social media posts? So we'll be able to later on look at results and say, okay, in this week we had very good results from Twitter, especially from these questions that we asked in the morning. If you want to go into this level of detail, you need to plan it out and put that into the UTMs. So you might want to utilize a mind mapping software like we do sometimes, or just do this in a spreadsheet. But when it then actually comes to tagging, you can start filling out your tool of choice. In our case, it would be our UTM builder sheet. And I have come up with some examples right here. So obviously you would fill out this thing. Down here we have now examples as well. So for Facebook campaign, for example, I already told you that you can make this dynamically. I put in the values that we know from the value parameters that we can pull in. And I would just simply utilize this link over and over again in all of your ads because it will give you consistency as they are dynamically filled out. But what if you wanted to write 3 different social media posts, right? So we have here social posts. This is a little bit small. So let me see if I can or zoom out here a bit. And here we go. We have 3 maybe social posts that we want to do about our services. And we keep certain buckets consistent because we want to all go tag them with, they go into the campaign medium social and then the source Facebook. But then we would say maybe we send this out via a post that we put onto our social feed. We could also send a messenger or post a Facebook story. Obviously, there are different formats that you could do this in. But then again, we want to again look at the campaign content. That should be all the same. Maybe we are doing another social post that is not about the discount, but it's maybe about the summer sale campaign. So you would be able to compare just within the post section which of your campaigns performed better. In the end, you get feedback,
That's
and that's
that's
really
the key part right there. What he just said is such a big key. I'm going to show you guys something. When you go to reports, if you go to Explorer and you just take a look around, you'll be able to pretty much map together any kind of report that you want to. I don't do it a lot. It's difficult, but for the average person, it's going to be pretty difficult. I'll just say that. Um, so what you can do is you can choose your metrics and your dimensions, just like anywhere else. The problem is people don't jive well with those types of terms. They don't really understand exactly what it means. What is the difference between a metric and a dimension? And ultimately, it just leads to more and more confusion. But clearly, these dimensions are telling us where traffic is coming from, and a metric is used for measurement. So dimensions define and metrics calculate, essentially. So a number, can you count it? Add to carts, item quantity, how much revenue, how many views, right? Um, it's a way or a unit of measurement. And you can put your custom metrics in here too. Let's say that I have, oh man, I don't know, a very specific type of lead. I can name that lead and say VIP lead, and that would be a custom way of measuring. A VIP lead view, maybe, or a VIP lead event. How many times did it happen? Um, yeah, I think. So essentially, you can build it there. But what he's talking about in that thing we just saw is if I just go to traffic acquisition and we look at this, we can look at where it was at on the page. So where this traffic came from, where they went to, and ultimately you're going to get to like event count, conversions, and some other things. So In addition to this, you're going to be able to make room to have it here as well, because it will be a campaign based on UTMs, right? So the cool thing is you can combine data in an organized way on the default reports already built for you, instead of having to go in and learn how to build out uh, a complete report. Anyways, that's always interesting, um, and it makes UTMs all the more worth it. So what I've been telling people is an event can have multiple parameters. So if I go over to this and I just create an event, okay, I'm going to show you some things about what makes GA4 so cool. So I can make a test event here, and that event can be based on a form submit happening, plus they need to have been on a certain uh, item name. So if you're running an e-commerce store, you can go variant socks. I don't know. So if that parameter feels that way, then you can even go further. I can go variant. I can say what page was located, what was the page refer. This is why people like this as a kind of a, you can tie this to like affiliate stuff too. It's really interesting. Okay, page location. You can go checkout page. This is how we know that they chose the upsell or whatever. And page refer can be, I don't know, affiliate, stock. It'd be like this, stock, warehouse, whatever. All right, great. So if you create that, and when this comes through as test, I can copy this from the source event. So in this form submit event called form submit, I have an opportunity to pull a lot of variable information. And so I'm going to show you that part, because I can pull all the information through based on modified events, right? Um, form submit. So if I were to just create a form submit event, and I'm using the GA4 tag, uh, and it's all configured. The reason you use tags, the reason you use GTM is because it's a place to put everything that's going on, every piece of marketing software on your website. It's a place to put it and organize it. And as far as tag is concerned, a tag is used because it's a template, so that instead of putting in raw code and then having it exposed to the back end, having people able to peek in and mess with it or tweak it rather easily. Not that this is more secure, it's a lot easier to use for the user. So if you're a business owner and you're not a developer and you just need to click around and get things going, this is way more accessible. And I can set my configuration tag, I can make it different. So the configuration tag can be attached um, separately on different sites that have to do with this. But I typically only use one configuration tag, because one time I put multiple configuration tags, one on the test site and one on the production site, and uh, there were some major issues from that. Now, I know that it's possible. I need to experiment with it and get it going. I'm not here to tell you guys that this is the only way to set any of this stuff up. I'm just showing my process. And so we were talking about form submit in this context. I wanted to let you guys know that yes, we can create an entire new event based on very specific things happening on page with that visitor. But in addition to that, where it gets juicy is this event alone can copy over and fulfill the additional uh, parameters. And then I can also modify on top of that, obviously. So I can add more parameters to the copied parameters from the event. That's what this says, copy from source event. So what you want to do is see what you should be pulling in here. So when a form submit happens for me, I can pull this in, company, um, current provider. This is something I'm currently doing. You have to have your consent management set up. You have to have your cookies set up. That's something that the reason why I don't have this on my site yet is because you can really pull quite a bit of information. I can also do user ID, and I'll pull that in. And then I'll do buyer type. I'm just using some naming conventions that I've used already. And then I can go form submit. The trigger that I want to trigger that form submit is, I don't ever use this, but hey, it's the first time for everything. Okay, so I can do this for some forms or all forms. We recommend enabling this trigger only on the pages where you need it and testing your changes before publishing. I've never used this, and this is kind of why. I typically, what I'll do, but there's a first time for everything. This is the thing. Whenever these tools are evolving and changing, you might have some hard and fast rules. We're all human. We have our biases. You might say, hey, I'm never going to use that trigger. But as things update and change, as you know, some things are going to work better, some things are going to work worse. You need to go back and check in. You need to go back and make sure. So I'm going to play with it that way. And what I can do is also make it fire that code off of a custom event, which is what I like to do. So if I see form submit, then I'll fire form submit. I can also go form submit catch all. I wouldn't do that. I would probably just go, um, let's do it like this. So then I can go custom event. This is the submission trigger. So we're either going to see that or this standard trigger is going to fire or both will fire. And then I can choose which one I want to keep. If both of these fire correctly at the correct moment in the way that I would like, then I will probably at that point remove this guy and test my own site with this standard form submission trigger. Sometimes customizing is better depending on the site, obviously. But I need to be using the standard things just in case that I'm able to find out that I can pull more information because of it. Okay, so I'm going to create data layer variables for these. That looks something like this. Really not hard, but I'm here to do it for you. It already has this name. Try something else. Okay, I didn't see it for some reason. Let's try it. Yep. All right. I forgot email. Yep. Choose built-in new variable. Okay. Company. This is how this looks. Hi, Giselle. Can you hear me? Hold on. Let me hit her up. All right. Let me see. Current provider. I don't really need this. I'll just do these so we can get through this. Okay, cool. So those are my, if you know, you know. That's not what that is. This is GA4 event. That's how I was taught to kind of do this. I'm pretty good about it nowadays. Back when I first did this, not so much. And just remember, man, I've been at this, right? 3 years ago, some of these old, old, old. Um, and that's just when I built BHT. Before I built BHT, I was still messing around with affiliate SEO and just going super hard on that. I remember, damn. I've just stayed down for a very long time. Very thankful for where I've gotten. It took a while.
You would use inside of your posts in order to link up your website on your Facebook posts. Another example here, let's go with social, which is already social. Let's say you have different social platforms like YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and then you tweet out or you send out exactly the same message here about our newest blog post about GA4 sessions. So I put this into the campaign name because the question that we are trying to answer with these UTM parameters is simply what performs better, YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter. And overall, we want to also count whether the user is coming from a social channel. But I don't want to go into detail right here. So it's not about the wording that I used in this post because I won't be A/B testing or trying to figure out if this wording was better or that wording was better. But if I had different ad formats, I could obviously go into more detail. Really depends on what questions you're trying to answer later on. I would not try to go into too much detail here and fill this all out. So it's not
Mm.
recommended to do all of this because if you never look at this data, it doesn't provide any value to you. So rather ask pointed questions and tag your links at least with campaign medium source and the campaign name. All right, then a newsletter example. Here we have a newsletter that goes out on week 53, and we are tweeting out or we are sending out in the newsletter. Let's say we have one newsletter in front of us, and inside of that newsletter there are 4 links, and these need to be tagged correctly. And then we go through these links and tag them with what we want to keep consistent. So email, newsletter, week 53. But then we have the CTA, for example, as the campaign content because it's a call to action. Maybe it's a button inside of the newsletter. Now you could put in more detail. So maybe you could say and reference the actual URL or the purpose of this in the UTM term. So here we go to services, there we go to measure masters, and here we go to the blog, and here we go to contact us. It's really up to you, but again, I want to give you a few examples here. So these are the links that I would then utilize in the newsletter itself. Email sequences are obviously different. They go out automatically. So maybe they're not written on a weekly basis. And we have here email. Then we have the campaign source automation. You could change this around and say, I would rather call it sequence or automated email. That's all fine as long as you keep it all consistent because you don't want to have a mix up in terms of your UTMs there. Then this is in the welcome sequence. So here would be the sequence name and then maybe the short outline of what the content is about or the subject line that this actually provides. By the way, some email providers actually help you with UTMs as well. You might want to look into how you can do this in your email marketing platform as well. So these are some examples of how you might tag social, Facebook, newsletter, and the other sequence. Obviously, we also have some examples here, so Super Bowl ad, a news ad, and so on. This is more the structural overview. In the end, you need to have some kind of overview of what UTMs you use, so you can reference later on and say, okay, please use this link. You can give this link actually to the email marketing team and say, please tag your links, or at least this link in your newsletter this way. So I hope this gives you a little bit of an overview of the little different examples that you could use UTMs in. And in the next lesson, we're going to take a look at how we can actually read them inside of GA4.
Nice. All right, this is it's what you've
All
all
right,
been
now you
waiting
tagged
for.
all your URLs with UTM parameters. You ran a campaign. Now you want to look into the results and actually
Hmm.
see how your campaigns performed. And that's what we're going to look at right now, how to read and analyze your UTM parameters within GA4. Now, big disclaimer here, you might know that you can look at GA4 data in many different ways. You can look at them in the interface itself. You might want to download your data into something like a Google Sheet, or you might be using BigQuery export to look at data inside of your data warehousing solution, or even inside of Data Studio. You won't be able to go through all of these different methods right here. They all have the same underlying basis of data. I'm just going to show you how you can see this in GA4 and how you can work with the data to answer some questions. So let's dive in. Let's go over to Google Analytics, and we kind of in the introductory section look at how we can look at our UTM parameters that we have created. For that, we go over to our standard reports here and click on the acquisition. So here we have our acquisition reports and we have traffic acquisition. What is actually the difference between user acquisition and traffic acquisition? Well, really, it's the attribution that is different here. So when we look at user acquisition, we might be looking at the first session that brought the user and how it is evaluated, what the first UTM was that brought the user. With traffic acquisition, we actually have a session scope report that will show us all of the different sessions that were started by certain UTMs or other parameters. Because by default, we have the channel grouping here. I'll talk about what the difference is between channel grouping and UTM parameters in our FAQ section. So for now, let's switch this over to session source medium. And here we go, we get our pair of source medium. So for example, we have many different pairs of mediums and sources here. So let's break it down actually and look at the first bucket, which is our source medium itself. So that should make it a little bit easier. So the first bucket, CPC, organic, referral, email, affiliate, and CPM. So let's dive into our email marketing here. How would we do that? Many different methods. I'm actually going to switch over here again back to session source medium. Wait for it. And then let's put in email up here. So we kind of filter this just based on email. And now we see there is medium email, and then the source was newsletter January 2023. If I'm interested in this one, I could add another dimension, the campaign name this time. So here's the session campaign. You always need to go with session because it's session scope. And unfortunately, they didn't use the session campaign in here. So that's where the bucket really stops already for our email marketing. Oh, they actually used it. It takes some time to load. All right, so there is a campaign called January
Hmm.
2023, and they didn't use any other session campaigns. So now I would like to look into the session content, for example, right? Now I could switch over here to content. So session manual add content, that's what it is. And it should break it down even further, right? We have the lunar year banner. Actually should be more. Maybe we
But
can
it's
put
not a
even more.
fixed
In general,
column.
this
That's the
format is
problem.
kind of hard to work with as we are in this predefined kind of space, and you can only add
Yeah,
these two dimensions. So either
he's
or,
gonna
source medium is obviously a dimension itself, but you could not really break down further and further. That is really hard to do with this report right
probably
here. But if we
suggest
just have the question, and we just want to look
Explorer.
at this, how much money or how much traffic did email actually bring us, we can really quickly find out if we are just looking at one pair of UTMs here. So the newsletter January 2023 brought 224 users or generated 492 sessions. And
Yeah,
then
that's
email brought
useful
22 minutes. And then we can
for a
also look at
quick
conversions here, generated
quick
4,100
update
for
for
conversions of
sure. You would
$4,000. So really great
you
information here
do
just to
better
find a
just
user and
sending
get this
it
report at
to
its end. But if you really want to analyze now and you want to
Looker.
compare against other UTMs, I think you need to be using the exploration. So we'll go over here to the exploration section. And this is
Yeah,
the reporting module that you should be familiar with. And we'll go with
that's a
a new
deeper
report.
report,
And
but
here
like
we are
Looker
going to
Studio
look at
would
this
be
report.
like
So
a
this is a new report
dashboard, so
and
it'd
it
be
started by
even more
setting dimensions.
accessible.
So the dimensions are basically your UTM parameters. So what UTM parameters are there? There is the medium. So let's just put this into search.
But it would
And
be
the session
great
content.
for
And the
everyone on
source.
the
So
team
let's
to
put this
have
into
this
search.
training,
Don't go to the attribution section. It's actually a
just so
session
they can
report.
get
So the session
comfortable
scope.
with it.
Session campaign is actually also what we want. We can get session ID as well. And then we have here down here
It
session
might
source
be
and
too
also
much
source
though.
platform. And then
It's a
our
lot.
add content. So this is the content. Then we have our term as well. So really everything is in there. Let me just check here.
Yeah, it's a
So we have
lot.
campaign, content, term, ID, the source platform, the creative format, creative format. No, that's not yet available. And then also the new one was the marketing tactic. Not really available yet. They're apparently already available in the data API. So if you pull down data with BigQuery, you would be able to query for them, but not yet in the URL
Mm,
itself. So what I'm going to do is just import what we still
nice.
have right here. And here we have our UTMs. And then we can look at the data that we want to display against these UTMs. So we need to be a little bit careful here because these are all session scopes. So we need to have at least session or user defined metrics. So what do we want to actually have as a number? How many people came to our site? So we'll go with sessions here. We want to have the sessions, maybe also how well traffic source is performing. So maybe the engagement rate. And then we want to get something like how many conversions were actually created by the session. So we'll go with the conversions. We can also go with conversion rate here. And maybe if it's an e-commerce site, you want to add transactions as well. So let's go ahead, put that in. And here we go. So then you need to drag and drop them all in. So we'll do this as our values down here. So let's do that. Let's do just two. I will do session and conversion. So how much traffic did we actually receive and how much traffic then turned into conversions. So So right now, obviously, this is all traffic. We would need to break it down. And we can break it down by looking at our biggest bucket, which is the source medium. So let's put this into a row here, and we get a breakdown of the different source mediums here. If you see none or not set, this is also very common. There might be a tracking mistake on your website, and you try to diminish this, but unfortunately, it's still the reality. In GA4, we see a lot of none and not set. So let's not focus on this right now, on this problem, but actually, let's look at our email campaign. So we want to dig deeper into the email campaign and actually know what kind of sources are connected to our medium here. So what I'm going to do is right click, and then I'm
I'm just the beautiful thing about this business is it makes you think. For me, I know politically, if I can put my uh, guy that's managing my contract, essentially, if I can put him into a better situation um, to speak to his manager based on the insights I can provide, that's going to be a big win. So there's a means to an end. There's a strategic play as a strategic manager of sorts in the marketing departments. And it starts with the data because everybody likes the idea of data being the driving force for their marketing. But the biggest problem is 9 times out of 10, it's a big mess. Nobody wants to deal with it. Nobody wants to organize it. And also, nobody even knows how to use it or what to measure. So there's a lot of different angles for you to specialize in when it comes to advising clients, who you advise, how far up the chain do you want to go, and who do you want to represent your ideas. It can be you representing your ideas. It can be someone else representing your ideas, and I think that um, is a lot more to it. But it's fun. It's fun because I get to kind of pick and choose where I want to be, what I want to focus on, and how these things matter to an organization overall. I'm learning to kind of, there's a playbook on how to set everything up and how to capture everything, but I'm now ready to build a playbook around the strategy. Like, what does this mean for everybody as an organization?
only
Yep.
include selection right here. And this does the same thing as taking our source medium here and putting it into the filters and then creating a filter exactly matching with email, right? So you could also do this manually, but this is the faster way actually. And now we have session medium email, and let's break it down even further with our session source. So I'm going to add this one to our rows. So here we go, we get all of the different session sources. Now, obviously this medium, the session medium is kind of unnecessary because we know we have filtered based on email. So maybe we just remove the medium here and we have break it down just by the source. So these are already all email, and we can see the generated email apparently had quite a few sessions and also conversions. So let's go ahead and dig deeper into this by right-clicking and including only this as the selection. Again, this will write us another filter. We have filtered on the medium email and now the source newsletter January 2023. Let's now put our next UTM in here, a session campaign, and we have two campaigns in here. Something about Luna. Is it Luna? That's a bit unfortunate that you can't really expand this in any kind of way. This really also depends on my screen size. So here we go. We have Luna New Year version 1 and version 2. So apparently the version 1 worked way better and we had way better conversions. So let's again include this in our selection. It will create a filter for us, and we should have now 4 filters here. Oh, we have 2. Okay, we'll just get rid of this one. So there are 3 filters here, medium, source, and now campaign. We are only looking at this campaign. Again, we can actually get rid now of the rows, and now we can break it down by the content that was actually posted. So we have the ad content right here. And as we see, the UTM content was used instead of the newsletter. And we have these different totals here for these different content banners. Apparently here, somebody has made a mistake and included another question mark, and so it wasn't properly recognized. So this would be a mistake that we would need to get rid of at the beginning by proper planning and putting that in. But here we can see, for instance, Tumblr and so on. These are apparently different products. I mean, I don't know exactly what was in the newsletter, but it's broken down here, and apparently this link has made most of the clicks and then also the conversions. So let's focus in on this one. And now let's see if it's broken down even further. So maybe they have used UTM ID. Let's go ahead and add this to our report as well. So this would be the campaign ID. No, it's not set. Let me put in the UTM term. Maybe the term was used. No, apparently also not set or not provided right here. So maybe they stopped at the content level and just had the different content pieces in there. So imagine you had 4 sets of UTMs from UTM medium email down to the content level, and you have this result right now. So now you can look at how many sessions did I have, how many conversions.
Hmm.
You can even look at more data,
Pretty quick.
like what was the engagement rate of this traffic by adding here the engagement rate or the session conversion rate, get in,
Gosh,
and the
that's
transactions
crazy.
statement as well. So you can answer these quite complex questions about specifically which UTMs you have used. And if you wanted to compare them against each other, you can obviously do this as well. Because what I can do right
Hmm.
here from this data, I can create a segment from this. And now we have all our rules in here. Let's call this somehow. So this is our session manual add content. Let's say this is our email segment. And we'll save this. All right, now we have built this. We can get rid of all
Yeah,
of these
that's
filters,
strong.
right? And now let's take a look at maybe a completely different set of UTM mediums. And
That's strong.
well, let's go actually again with email, and then let's add the source here. Let's say we have a campaign here that we want to look at, and then we have the campaign. This is the campaign source, so let's add the campaign name, and then also the content itself. So this is Cyber Monday deal. All right, and we have one here. Let's go ahead and actually create a segment from this one as well. And this is our Cyber Monday segment. Right, I'm going to save this. And what I'm going to do now is simply, let's get rid of all our filters again. And let's simply add our medium here. We have everything, but we want to actually implement our
That
segment as well.
is
So here we have the
audience.
segment comparison one. We have our email
Yeah.
segment, which was our New Year's campaign. And then we have our Cyber Monday one. And here we go. We get our two segments that are shown here in comparison. So we have the data here and we have the data here. So we can see what worked
Wow.
better, maybe
Yeah,
what was
that's
the other,
strong.
and what was the better conversion rate. So we have
That's really
these
strong.
transactions here and so on. So this is data that you can now compare against each other. I know it's a little bit hard to read, but at least you can answer the question, which campaign worked better and brought us, for example, more sales. So this is all the analysis that you might want to do on your UTM parameters. You work with the data, slice and dice it, segment it, and work with the data so you get to your desired answer that you asked at the beginning. And the GA4 exploration section is really just one module where you can do this. Obviously also exporting data or working with it in BigQuery or in Data Studio is possible. In our next lesson, I want to just tell you a little bit about some advanced use cases of what you can do with UTMs if you want to go beyond this basic training here.
This is cool. I think that what I would do more than anything at this point, save that part and go back and really dig into it. I've got to figure out um, each time I audit a website, so there's a flow, right? I audit the website, I find out what that person needs. Um, I go back to them, let them know, but also there's like this risky run of overwhelming the client, and I don't want to do that. So what I've really been focused on is how do I choose a path that's right for the person versus trying to have them choose it or um, you know, offering all the options. It's a lot. It's a lot. And then you get back to that same thing where, oh man, I don't want to deal with this.
In
It's
this lesson,
very
I want to let you
important,
know
but
about
people
some
don't want to deal with
UTMs.
it. It's like insurance. It's like any of those fields that are, people just don't want to typically deal with it. It's not sexy, and people already had it in their head before they even started working with you that it was going to be difficult. So my job is to uh, kind of turn that upside down and make it fun and easy to work with BHD, a data guy, right?
UTM techniques that are out there, just so you know that they exist. Maybe you want to dig deeper into them, and we'll leave some resources down below so you can do so. So first up, encoding additional information into one UTM. In this example here, we have our UTM source, and you see newsletter, but then you see two minus symbols and then
I
monthly.
got
And in
hurt
the second one, you have also UTM source and the newsletter,
on
and then weekly.
calisthenics.
So these are obviously two different sets of UTMs, but
Right, though.
instead of putting the weekly into one of the UTM parameters to distinguish this, we put it all into one UTM parameter. And this technique is oftentimes used if the UTM parameters that are available are not enough and you want to differentiate even further. You can push more information into the UTM parameters. Obviously, there is a little bit of a restriction of how long a URL can be, but you can push more information in and then separate that out later on. Unfortunately, you cannot do this in Google Analytics
Nice.
so easily, but if you would download the Google Analytics for data after the campaign has run, you could build a very easy function inside of Google Sheets, for example, to say anything where you see a minus minus, please put it into its own row or its own column. So you effectively double the
Mm,
space or triple the space that you have inside of UTMs if you use that kind of technique. It's definitely a little bit more advanced. Actually, the tools that I presented earlier can help you to do these kind of things as well. Next up, we have using URL shorteners. Now, a lot of people are using URL shorteners just because of the limit of the characters that you can have, for example, in tweets and so on. For others, it's important that the URL looks nice, and then for others, it's important to hide the UTM parameters. So you can turn a long UTM URL and landing page into something that is short and memorable, for example. So we bought the domain Measure FYI just recently, and URLs for us and these redirects, so we can create very easily links like measure.fyi/school. On a different note, actually, this tool that we have installed, Foxly, helps us to then manage these links. So if you wanted to change the UTM parameters at any time, we can do so because we actually control the redirect as well. So there's a lot of advantages of using such a URL shortener for these
ooh,
purposes. But probably you want to check out Foxly or any other URL shorteners out there. I trust you that you'll find the solution that is good for you. The next one is simply using QR codes. You might know that QR
that's
codes are a
dope.
simple version of a URL that can be photographed with a phone, and then the camera can direct you directly to the website itself. This can be super beneficial if you take a URL that is tagged with UTM parameters and feed it into one of these QR code generators, and then when somebody scans the QR code, they are directed to your website with UTM parameters attached. So also quite
Right.
a cool technique to utilize when you don't want to write out the URL, or the user shouldn't write out the URL itself. Then we also have vanity URLs. So if you have a TV ad running, it might be hard to convince the user to go to measureschool.com/landing page question mark UTM underscore source equals TV ad. It's just too long to remember and nobody would type that in. And therefore, this is an often used trick. You would just give them like a short link, but a URL that is dedicated to only that campaign. So for example, an insurance might do an ad about how to get home safe, and then they have a vanity URL called gethomesafe.com. Something that is super easy to remember, so people can pull out their phone, type that in, and they go to the URL. Obviously, then they are redirected to go to your landing page with UTM parameters attached. So vanity URLs is a very good trick to utilize as well. All right, and then we come to the GTM use cases. Now, if you think of GTM, then GTM is the tool that sits between the user clicking on your ad, going to the UTM tag URL, and that URL reading.
This is, oh man, I wasn't crazy. So, um, I had this thought last night while I was falling asleep. Sometimes I have these weird like things pop up and I'm like, oh shoot, I could do it. But I bet he's going to talk about using a lookup table in order to populate parameters.
Google Analytics and being displayed there. In between, you can do so much with Google Tag Manager. First of all, you can clean UTMs as well. So if you find anything, like we did earlier in our
Mm,
analysis, wrong with our UTMs, we could go in and say, okay, this happened this time. We cannot go back and change the campaign now. So I'm going to, before I send it over to Google Analytics, clean that URL, and I can write some JavaScript rules in order to clean and make sure that our UTMs are in a certain format. You can also utilize something called
nice.
dynamic UTMs, and that is taking advantage of the capabilities of Google Tag Manager. So for example, somebody comes from YouTube, then we have maybe a referrer information that we could utilize, and we can build a UTM parameter dynamically of the information that we have from that referrer. So we know he comes from YouTube, maybe even know the YouTube video that he watched. We take the ID of the video and then dynamically
Oh,
load that into the UTM
so
source. So
good.
a bit more advanced, but again, this is all about possibilities. Then you can also create your own UTMs. If you think about it, UTMs are just custom dimensions inside of Google Analytics that have a certain space and namespace. But if you would create your own custom dimensions, which you can do inside of Google Analytics, you have 50 spaces free, then you can create your own UTMs that might not be named UTM underscore platform or something like that. You can come up with completely your own
Right.
set and then utilize that in the same manner and tag your traffic this way. And then you can also utilize the history API in order to hide the UTM parameters. It's important with Google Tag Manager that the full URL gets sent over to Google Analytics, but after that, you could hide the query string away so the user doesn't actually see it, which might be actually beneficial when you think about it, that the user might grab the URL, copy it, and send it over to a friend, and the UTM parameters are kind of attached. Maybe you don't want that, and therefore you can change that around. Actually, what you could also do is then change around the UTM parameters, and after the user has landed on your landing page, so when he copies the actual URL from the top, you could change it around for, hey, somebody has actually shared this, and turn this into a share UTM parameter, so you know how often your content was shared. Again, this is pretty advanced techniques, but really something to think about
Yes,
because Google
that'd
Tag
be
Manager
dope.
has the capabilities of inserting itself in that space where your data has not yet been sent to Google Analytics. Maybe I'll do some more tutorials about this in the future. All right, hope you know now what is
That's
possible with UTMs
heavy.
and that there's a whole other world to explore. And I hope this piqued your interest.
Super
Next
heavy.
lesson, we're going to talk about some frequently asked questions
Check
around
this
UTMs.
guy out. Bounteous. Bounteous. This is great. I'm going to read this.